All right, let's dive into one of the toughest questions out there. What actually makes a person violent? For the next few minutes, we're going to set aside morality, set aside law, and just look at the raw biology, the circuits, the chemicals, and the genes that can bubble up into aggressive behavior.
So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Is violence a disease? Now, hang on. This isn't about making excuses for anyone's actions. It's about putting on a scientist's hat and trying to understand the biological roots of aggression, just like we would for any other complex human condition. Okay, first thing we have to get our heads around is that aggression isn't just one single thing. Not at all. In fact, scientists say it's absolutely essential to split it into two very different types, because biologically, they're like night and day. So on one hand, you've got what's called reactive or hot aggression. You know this one. It's that impulsive, emotional, defensive flare-up, a sudden fit of rage. But on the other hand, you have proactive or cold aggression. This is totally different. It's premeditated, instrumental, and predatory. It's using violence as a tool to get something. The brain activity behind a defensive shove is just on a different planet from a carefully planned attack. So, how does the brain even manage these behaviors, or fail to manage them? Well, that takes us right into the brain's own internal chain of command. Let's make this super simple with an analogy. Think of your brain's emotional control system like a car. You've got the amygdala, that's your gas pedal. It's an ancient part of the brain, our little threat detector, and it's always screaming, threat, danger, go, go, go. But then you have the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. That's the modern rational part of the brain. It's the brake pedal. It's the CEO in the driver's seat saying, whoa, hold on a second. Let's think about this. What are the consequences here? So you can probably guess what happens when that circuit gets messed up. Scientists call it dysregulated connectivity. Basically, the prefrontal cortex, our brake pedal, can't get a strong enough signal through to calm down the amygdala, which is just flooring the gas pedal. And the result? An out-of-control emotional response. You know, the exact kind of thing we see in that impulsive, reactive aggression. But it's not just about the wiring, right? This whole system, the gas and the brake, is constantly swimming in a really complex cocktail of chemicals. So let's look at the key neurotransmitters that can either crank up the volume on aggression or dial it way down. For years and years, the story we were told was pretty simple. It was called the serotonin deficiency hypothesis. The basic idea was that serotonin was this civilizing chemical in our brains. If you had low levels of it, you were prone to violent outbursts. Simple. But as you're about to see, the real story is so much more interesting and way more complicated.
Yeah, the modern view is a lot more nuanced. It turns out serotonin isn't just some simple on-off switch for violence. Its real job is to act like a crucial stabilizer for that whole brake pedal, gas pedal connection we were talking about. It basically helps the PFC and the amygdala communicate clearly. So the problem isn't just about having low serotonin. It's about whether that entire communication system is functioning the way it's supposed to.
Okay, next up, dopamine. Now, we all hear it called the pleasure molecule, but a much better name for it is the motivation molecule. Dopamine is all about the pursuit of a reward. It's the chemical that drives that wanting feeling, whether you're wanting a good meal or a big promotion. And this is where things take a really dark turn. It turns out that for some people, in some brains, the act of aggression itself can be the reward. Dopamine levels have been shown to spike, not just during a fight, but even in anticipation of one. And that creates this powerful, vicious reinforcement loop where the brain starts to be actively motivated to go looking for the next conflict. And then we have noradrenaline. This stuff is pure arousal fuel. It's the juice that powers our fight or flight response. When it floods your system, your focus sharpens, your body gets ready for intense action. It's the reason your heart starts pounding in your chest before a potential confrontation. This chemical is exactly why just the thought of a conflict can feel so physically overwhelming. Noradrenaline is what's kicking your entire nervous system into overdrive. And this, by the way, is also why beta blockers, which are drugs that literally block noradrenaline, can be so effective at calming down that physical storm of anxiety and aggression. So we have the brain circuits and we have the chemical cocktail. But that's still not the whole picture. The final and maybe most important piece of this puzzle is the incredible, powerful dance between our genetic blueprint and our actual life experiences. Let's zoom in on one specific gene that gets a lot of attention here, the MAO-A gene. Basically, This gene holds the recipe for an enzyme that acts like the brain's chemical cleanup crew. Its job is to break down key neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine after they've done their job.
But here's the crucial part. This gene doesn't work in a bubble. This is the classic example of a gene-by-environment interaction. So imagine this. Step 1. Someone has a genetic variant that makes their cleanup crew a little less efficient. Step 2. That same person experiences severe trauma or abuse in childhood. It's the combination of those two things, the genetic predisposition and the environmental trigger, that creates a real vulnerability to impulsive aggression later in life. One without the other just doesn't have the same effect.
And this discovery leads to a fascinating paradox that totally flipped that old, simple theory on its head. There's a very rare condition called Bruner syndrome, where the MAO gene is basically completely knocked out. It doesn't work at all. So the cleanup crew is gone. The result? A massive flood of serotonin in the brain. Now, the old hypothesis would say these individuals should be incredibly calm, right? But the exact opposite is true. The condition is linked to abnormally high levels of aggression. This was absolute proof that the system is way more complex than just more or less of a single chemical. Okay, let's take a step back now and try to put all of these pieces together. After looking at all of this evidence, what's the big picture? What's the final takeaway? At the end of the day, here's what it all boils down to. There is no single violence button in the human brain. There's no one bad gene or one evil chemical or one broken wire. Aggression is a complex, emergent property. It's born from this constant, dynamic interplay between our brain's circuitry, our chemical messengers, our genetic predispositions, and, crucially, the environment that shapes us. And understanding all this science forces us to face a really profound and honestly pretty uncomfortable question. If our behavior is so deeply shaped by our biology and our past experiences, things that are largely outside of our conscious control, what does that really mean for our concepts of free will, of responsibility, of justice? That's the huge question this science leaves us with.